Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, and today I am joined by Matthew Caito. He is the faculty at Butler University at the Lacy School of Business, and he teaches operations and analytics as well. I actually met Matthew at the C conference, which you guys may remember, that we were hyping up on the podcast and also that we were a part of. I did a live podcast there, actually, right when all of the COVID stuff started to hit. So it's been interesting, obviously, since that episode went out. But we're going to catch up with Matthew, hear a little bit about his background, talk to him about what's the education climate like right now and how has it been. Also about, what are some popular topics that students are interested in the future of our industry. And then also talk to him a little bit about his background from working in distribution of fresh prepared foods and fresh produce and kind of how the effect of the pandemic has been on that. And then we'll talk about some other things too. So Matthew, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing fine. It's great to see you again. I saw you down in Modex briefly, but that was a truncated show, so I didn't get to hang around very long.
Yeah, I mean, that week of Modex and then the C conference, that was a whole interesting time when all this was kind of pretty much unfolding, I think, that week there.
Yeah, that was the week.
Yeah, so tell us about how you've been. Tell us about your background for the listeners that may not be familiar with you.
Sure. Well, currently I teach operations and supply chain management and business analytics at the Lacy School of Business here in Indianapolis. Mm. And prior to that, I worked in our family business for 27 years. And I'll give you a bit of a background there. Our family business began in the mid-'60s with my dad, and eventually he was joined by my uncle. And they built up quite a substantial fresh produce distribution company. Mm. And by the time we sold the business in 2017, and by that time we were doing business in 26 states, and we had 5 distribution centers.
Oh, wow.
But what was really cool about fresh produce is that it's a very fast business. And, growing up in the business, obviously I got to see it expand from, a small local player into somewhat of a national or regional player. I got to see that growth front seat. And, for 27 years of my career, I got to experience a lot of that, and it gave me a really good insight to business. And like I like to tell people, I learned a lot in an MBA class, but I learned even more, a lot faster from really progressive large companies like Walmart and Costco, dealing with Kroger, Disney, some of the large companies like that. It was really a good education, but what's really fascinating about fresh produce is because there's so many inventory turns, you get to see a lot very quickly. And that's probably what made it the most interesting for me. The other thing is that I'm a data guy and a numbers guy, and we generated a lot of information, a lot of data. And if we could leverage that data and make better decisions, that's what we were all about.
Definitely. I like your point there about learning quickly from the big guys, because to do business with them, they kind of force you to do that, right?
Yeah. And, large companies, they're difficult to deal with, but they make you a better player, and they make you smarter. And, for the most part, we were very fortunate. The companies we dealt with were very fair with us. And one of the things I'd like to stress to my students is, you want to partner with tough customers. You want to partner with your suppliers, because if you work with them closely, ultimately it makes you more successful, and it makes your supply chain tighter and more efficient.
Definitely, yeah. And I think that kind of that synergy and working with other companies is definitely how you can progress your company and also get other learnings from them as well, just to improve your operation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did the, I guess, transition from that to education happen?
Well, it was, I would say, an unplanned transition.
Okay.
After the sale, I kind of was on the shelf for a bit, and I knew I wanted to teach, and I wasn't quite sure how, and I wasn't quite sure of my qualifications. So I have a master's in business and marketing, and put my resume out and did some adjunct work at the University of Indianapolis here in town, and hired on full time at Butler.
Okay.
And I had my MBA from Butler, and Butler's 3 miles from my house. So I was very excited to start a new career, and I was looking at something to do for the next 20 or 25 years. And what I got into it and started doing it, I really like it. And what I like about it is the enthusiasm. We have a lot of bright students at Butler. The interactions are good. They ask tough questions. They're polite kids, and they like to learn. And what I bring to the table is that 27 years of experience dealing with Kroger, dealing with Costco, dealing with these really large companies, dealing internationally, and really being able to talk about the theory of what we talk about in class, but then also to show, what's really important is, this theory is important, but what's really important is how you treat your people, or how you reward your people, or how you incentivize your people. What type of details you need to watch when you're running a business. In my career, we were fortunate. At one point, we had 8 or 9 different P&Ls we were looking at, very varied businesses as far as we were producing fresh foods. We were wholesaling. We actually did the marketing for Disney for 5 years on their branded produce. So I got to see a lot of cool things, and the students like those stories, and it keeps them interested.
Yeah, I think that's key, because, a lot of times you get all this theory, and if you don't have any, I guess, kind of real world examples, you get into the real world, and there's all these different variables, and you're kind of like, oh, well, the textbook didn't say this is what's supposed to happen right now, right?
Right. And like I tell them, I've got college age students, college age kids at home. It's all about the data, and we don't need to be mathematicians, but we need to understand how we can use data. We need to understand when we need to bring in people who can help us, and we need to understand, ways that we can collect data. What I've seen, even in my 3 years of teaching, is there's been a lot of development in the actual theory of data, how we collect it, and how we analyze it, and how we get that information in front of frontline managers. And that's what's really helping drive a lot of success in businesses right now.
Definitely, yeah. I see the same on my end. I'm involved with Rider University in New Jersey, and their supply chain students through APICS, and so many of them are actually double majors in supply chain and data analytics. And I think it's, like you said, it's coming so hand in hand, because it's becoming so important to be able to not only, I guess, collect data, but then use it in a useful way and present it in a useful way.
Yeah, and frankly, one of the challenges is to get over the intimidation, or data intimidation, or the fear of data, or as I tell my students, this memory's cheap. You may as well collect as much data as you can, because even if you can't use it today, you may be able to use it as data points down the road. Once students get comfortable with it, they understand that they don't need to be intimidated by it, then that's where the creativity starts. That's when they start looking around for ways that they can leverage what used to be meaningless data, or used to be too much data to look at. Now they can figure out how to put that into either a database or some type of a data model where they can make actionable decisions very quickly.
Definitely. I totally agree. So I'm curious now, what, with the whole pandemic and COVID going on, What's the current education climate like, and how is it? I guess the semester is, I'm guessing, over at this point, but how was it kind of transitioning that, and how did the students do?
The spring semester is over now, and it was quite interesting to go through. We went on spring break, which that's when I saw you in Modex.
Right.
And about halfway through spring break, they said, you know what, we're not coming back, so we need you to transition your class to online, which I'd never taught online, but it was a good exercise. I was able to change a lot of things and rework the way that the presentation went. But the students were pretty adaptable. I think our faculty at Butler was very adaptable. Certainly the school administration was very adaptable. And, we got an extra 3 days of spring break to transition the courses. But what I liked about the transitioning was a couple things. It was a built-in example of adaptability. It was a built-in example of what can happen in the real world that you don't really think about or can't imagine until you've actually lived through it. We're a very experiential school, so we use that a lot. But I was able to do a lot of synchronous and asynchronous learning, changed a little bit of the grading process. I think for the most part, the students liked it. There were some things, obviously, I would do a little bit better. But what's really interesting to me as a business person and as an operations person is how the university is reacting to it, not just our university, but all the universities. Right. And we're seeing different concepts with flipped classrooms, different pedagogy, and changing ways of interfacing with the students. Definitely a big push on technology such as Zoom and Panopto and some of these other video technologies. So it's been very adaptable. I think the industry, the higher education industry, was caught just as surprised, just as everybody else. But I think they've adapted well. And what's going to be really interesting is what things look like going forward. With new buildings and new new dorm rooms, new facilities at a lot of colleges. Big part of the college experience is being on campus. And what is that going to look like now? And how are we going to ensure the safety of the students? How are we going to ensure the safety of the faculty? These are all the same questions that all of America has, but it's interesting to see the approach that the higher education industry is taking towards it.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you for that insight, because I've been curious kind of how I hear from some student perspective. I'm curious from teaching perspective as well.
Well, I found that I definitely remember names better when I'm in the classroom. That's always a challenge to remember the names. But, there are some people who adapted very quickly. And generally, the rule of thumb I ended up with, if your camera was on, I would ask you questions. And if your camera wasn't on, I wouldn't ask you questions. And what was really pleasantly surprising is I had, upper 90s participation. And I could call on people and they were engaged. So I like to see that. They definitely liked a set time to meet and a set presentation. I think we all got into this where you forgot what day of the week it was or what time of the day it was. So having that set time and having a set presentation or a set schedule was actually pretty helpful for everybody.
Definitely. So I'm curious then, as a part of COVID, but just education in general, as the students are the future of our industry, obviously, what's some of the hottest topics or the topics that students are most receptive to right now? What are they, hungriest to learn about?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
The first thing that pops in my mind is data, and understanding data and understanding how to leverage it. And that's pretty fundamental to what we do in operations and supply chain, and especially with managing people, and especially with getting things done quickly. Years ago, you order things, and the standard phrase was wait 4 to 6 weeks. Well, now it's, hey, if it's not here by Tuesday, you're going to be upset.
Yeah.
Or if you have to pay to have it delivered, you're going to be upset. So understanding the rapidity of data and the need to have data to make really quick decisions is something that students get excited about. I got two other things that they get excited about. The other one, one of the other ones is the actual logistics and supply chain. The class I teach is a required course, so not a lot of people, it's not an elective course, they have to take it. And one of the biggest comments I get at the end of the semester is, I had no idea what logistics and supply chain was. And now I do. And I like to not tease the students, but have them get very observant about things. We'll talk about retail facilities. We talk about manufacturing facilities and why they're located where they are. And, I'll throw out the challenge, when you're driving home, notice where the big distribution centers are, notice what the strip centers look like. And inevitably I get students who come back from vacation, they say, I never thought of it, but now that I listen into the class, I can start to see exactly what you're talking about just about everywhere. So that's the second thing I think they find exciting, is just that logistics and supply chain is all around them, and they're firsthand participators in it.
Right.
And then the third thing that we really like to stress at the Lacy School of Business is experiential learning. So all of our students take at least 2 internships, which are pretty high value. I've had quite a few students work overseas, and been very fortunate with getting good internships. But they also run a business, and they also sell things as part of their undergraduate experience. So one of the things I bring to the class that I think is a little bit different is that, just going back to what I was talking about with the inventory turns and seeing so many different things, bringing that excitement and bringing those real world observations to the students, I think is going to make them better players. And by better players in the industry. We talk a lot in the class that, when you graduate, it's a 40-year marathon. Right. And you need to know to pace yourself. You need to know what to watch out for. It used to be that I would say in class, I hope none of you live through a September 11 again or a Gulf War again. Well, now, one of the things we talked about over the last couple of months is you've lived through a pandemic. And the next time that there's a pandemic, if you're in charge of a store, what are some of the decisions that you're going to make? Obviously, you're going to stock up on toilet paper to sell. But from a business perspective, you got to conserve your cash. You've got to make decisions very quickly that people understand the rationale, and you've got to be able to communicate that very clearly. So those are the 3 points. I've been a bit long-winded, but the data, the logistics, and then how things actually work in the real world.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And I like that you said how you have students who are like, I didn't realize that's what logistics and supply chain was. And like you said, it's everywhere, right? Everything that we have pretty much has been touched in some way by logistics or the supply chain, all products that we use, especially as we're moving so much more to e-commerce, especially, as we can't go to stores because stores are closed during this time.
One of the favorite stories is, what does it take to get an iPod or a cell phone to you? And we'll talk about, well, how much do you think it costs to move that phone from Guangzhou to Long Beach? And inevitably somebody's saying, $15, $16. Well, what if I told you that it only costs like 10 cents? And to get it from Long Beach to Chicago is probably going to cost you maybe $1. And to get it from Chicago to Indianapolis might cost $2 or $3. And then to actually get it to your house is going to cost $15. So once we tell that story, which obviously is going to get their attention right away, we can go backwards and look at each one of those modes of transportation and understand why it is expensive, or what they're going to have to do when they have a company and they want to get something from here to New Jersey and get it there overnight. What's it going to cost, and how are they going to get that done?
Definitely. I think it's an interesting perspective there. So let's switch gears a little bit, and we'll put on your previous career hat, working in fresh prepared foods and fresh produce. And I'm curious, what insights do you have in terms of what has been happening, or what did happen during this whole pandemic, and with the distribution of fresh prepared foods and fresh produce? How did that kind of change? I mean, I was seeing some different things about produce was available, but it wasn't able to necessarily get where it needed to get. What were you seeing, and what do you think was happening?
Well, I think the big word with the industry, I'll do a shameless industry plug here. The fresh food industry is very resilient, very quick, and there's a lot of risk in what you're doing with fresh food. And I'm going to explain that. When I talk about fresh or perishable foods, everything is on the clock. I talked about a lot of inventory turns. In an industry like fresh produce, you'll have 150 turns a year. So if you don't sell something in 2 or 3 days, you're going to have a big problem. So it's an industry that's built on speed. It's an industry that's built on efficiency, because let's face it, you're working on fractional pennies. It's very low margin business, and it's an industry that's built on relationships. A lot of things have to go right to get the banana to your store at the right temperature and the right condition. A lot of things have to happen correctly for lettuce to get to your store. But what was interesting is we start to run into a couple of capacity issues, not a couple, but some significant capacity issues, and we run into some significant distribution channel issues. So when we look at fresh food, there are two main channels. One is the retail channel, or the grocery channel, and that would be buying the fresh produce down at your local store.
Right.
The other channel is the food service channel. And the food service channel would be restaurants, institutions, schools, hospitals, prisons, anything that you don't buy at the grocery store that you would consume. That's the food service channel. Well, over the last decade or so, the food service channel's really grown. It's really quite a large share of the food dollars. It's over 50% of the food dollars. So that means that 50% of the food we consume is outside the house. So what happens if you wake up on a Monday and your world's upside down, and all of a sudden that food service channel shut down because all the restaurants are shut down, because all the kids are out of school, because the airlines are shut down? So the food's there, the consumption is there because people still have to eat, but all that consumption now had to shift instantly from the food service channel into the retail channel.
Interesting.
So your first thought is, they can handle it, but they're completely different channels. They're different types of trucks, different types of facilities, different types of packaging. So you take an item like romaine lettuce, it's packaged differently when it goes to a restaurant than it is at the grocery store. So even though they're growing enough romaine to feed all the Americans or all the people, they have to change the packaging, or they have to change how it's going to get to the store, because the food service distribution channel is not geared up to supply stores or geared up to supply restaurants. So it's a capacity issue where all of a sudden the retail distributors are working 50, 60, 70% over capacity, and the food service sector is essentially down 80%. So that's been interesting to watch. It's starting to come back now, but I read quite a few articles where restaurants would, obviously there's a big change to takeout, or you would see restaurants become commercial bakeries somehow, or you would see food service distributors find a way to get food to consumers directly instead of going to restaurants. And it goes back to that word, that's that resilience. And it's an industry that's built on resilience, because face it, most of the stuff they grow is grown in the ground out in the field, and they can't control the weather. So they're used to a lot of risk like that. But this has been completely unprecedented. And I'm proud to be a former part of that industry, because I think they handled it pretty well.
Definitely. I will say that, going into the grocery store and looking at the produce and stuff, I mean, there were some things that were short, but I wouldn't say like it was short for long. So like you said, I mean, definitely resilient and definitely able to kind of, I guess, pivot and go in a different channel, like you mentioned. So I'm curious, what do you think the long lasting impact on the distribution of these items will be? I know there's been a lot of, I guess there's probably going to be some sense as places start to open back up. There's going to be, like you said, the food service channel. They're opening at reduced capacity, and there's probably going to be additional measures in place, I would imagine, that would be long lasting in terms of not having maybe as many people in one place as before. So do you think that changes the distribution anyway? And also, with things like Instacart and home grocery delivery, is that on the rise?
Yeah, and that's going to continue to grow. Touchless is something that's going to come up. I love history. I majored in history undergrad, and I read quite a few newspaper articles from 100 years ago. So we had the pandemic of 1918 to 1920, which had a much higher mortality rate. But things really didn't get back to normal for 2 or 3 years. I think we're in a different state right now in that communication is much different than it was 100 years ago. I'm not going to be one that's going to come out and say we're not going to rebound for 3 or 4 years. But there's going to be a point where you go out and you're going to think twice about turning the doorknob. You're going to think twice about using the restroom at a restaurant if it doesn't look clean. You're going to think twice about the silverware. So touchless is going to be a theme that's going to really become important. And I'm talking in two different directions. One is for the consumer, touchless is going to be important, but also for the worker. And anything that we can do for the work to become touchless is going to be important as well. So I think long term, what I would expect to see is going to be much more automation in a lot of different levels for a couple of reasons. One is to reduce touch points. The other thing is, the other reason would be for efficiency. The cost of labor, I think, will ultimately go up as partial result of this. So I think we're going to see a lot more automation at a lot more frontline levels. I don't know what it looks like exactly, but you were down at Modex and you saw some of the automation that's out there. Oh, yeah. They'll find ways to use drones for counting things. There'll be robots that move things or can bring things to your table. Anything that the industry can do to bring down touch points, I think that's going to be a trend that continues. Anything that they can do to enhance their labor, and by enhancing the labor, that means using the labor for a higher purpose, not necessarily bringing in automation to eliminate jobs, but to allow those people to find a higher purpose or to create some other type of value for the organization. So the big thing I'm going to look for is automation and touchless technology.
Definitely, yeah, and I agree. I mean, I'm, being at Modex, I get on all the mailing list. I'm getting all these emails from robotics companies and automation companies about, AMRs and how they help you to reduce, the touch points and help you deal with the labor shortages and all those different things. So I think it's only going to, I guess, push that technology even further. And I think it's going to take that technology and maybe in some cases outside of the warehouse and see how can we apply it to different things. And for service items, when you go out to grocery store or something like that, how do we put more automation in place there as well?
Well, something as simple as your mail.
Yeah.
How do you get the mail inside your house? If there's a pandemic and you don't want to touch magazines or newspapers, how do you get them inside your house? If you want to get your food from Amazon or Kroger or any Walmart, any of the other major delivery companies, how do you get it inside your house and maintain the temperature and not touch it? So the automation, it's going to continue to get faster. It's going to continue to spur innovation, and it's going to go right into your house, right up to your door.
Definitely, yeah. I think it'd be really interesting to see how things, like you said, in the previous pandemic, it took 2 to 3 years to get back to normal. But it'll be interesting to see, I guess, in 2 years from now, what is normal, right? Because I think normal will be a little different.
Yeah, and if there's a second wave or a third wave, which these things have a nasty habit of doing, that's just going to muddy up the waters a bit more, unfortunately. But like one of the key takeaways from this last semester with the students was, guys, look around and look what your parents are doing, look what your classmates are doing, look what your neighbors are doing. And these are things that you got to put in the back of your head, because at some point something's going to come up like this again, and you're going to have to make decisions quickly because you'll be the leader. And what are people doing now that you're going to want to do when you're in their position in 20 years?
Definitely. I think that's a really good point, is how to take, what happened now, which is kind of unexpected, unprecedented, and how do you prepare yourself for the future just in case something like this happens again. So really good insight and really good information on both the education side and the fresh produce, fresh prepared food side as well. So Matthew, I want to thank you so much for joining me to talk on the New Warehouse podcast. How can people get in touch with you if they want to talk to you about the topics further?
I can email Caito, and that's MCAITO @butler.edu. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Most of the interactions I have are either on a consultancy basis or interviews like this.
Okay, great. And we'll post that information on the newwarehouse.com as well. So Matthew, thank you so much, and make sure you stay safe.
All right. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.